Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Honestly, you guys don't understand how excited I am to share this with you. I've been meaning to make birria tacos for literally since they were like a trend on TikTok a couple years ago. It's definitely a recipe that I was so intimidated to make, as the whole process just literally put me off in the sense of like I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. But after contemplating for so long, I managed to get all the ingredients. Being in the UK, I managed to even find the chilies that you use for it. And yeah, I'm going to show you exactly how I made it. It may look really intimidating that there are so many ingredients that you need to use, but I'm going to honestly make it so simple for you guys to understand how to make them. So from what I know, the authentic way to make birria tacos is either with goat or beef, but I wanted to try it out with lamb shanks and the shoulder piece next to the lamb shank to see how it turns out. I also did want to use a lamb shank piece as it has a bone, and I feel like when like a piece of meat has bone in it and you slow cook it, there's just a different type of flavour. If you guys don't know already, I actually made chicken birria tacos for the first time, as I wanted to basically get comfortable with slow cooking the meats and get used to making the sauce. So I did post that on my Instagram if you want to check it out. Recording this video was actually the first time that I have ever made these lamb shank birria tacos. So it was like a 50-50 chance that it was going to turn out good or not. But I decided to record the process just for myself. But the fact that it's turned out really good and the recipe works for other people, I decided that I was going to share it with you guys. So for the first step, I added some slits into the lamb shanks, something that I always do when I'm slow cooking meats. And I followed it by adding on some black pepper and some sea salt. Make sure you do this on both sides and you just coat it well. So next, what you want to do, in a pot, I added in some olive oil. I did use like a good 50 milliliters of olive oil as I really want it to have a nice sear on the meat. I don't know about you guys, but living in an Asian household, the next size pot to this one is honestly one that my mum makes for like rice dishes. So I had to basically cook the meat 2 by 2 as I couldn't add all the pieces in, and if I wanted to use a bigger pot it would have just been way too big, so I'm keeping it nice and small in this one. What I ended up doing for this part of the recipe is I'm basically just adding in the lamb shank pieces to some hot olive oil. It does look like it's kind of frying it, but I'm honestly just wanted to get a really nice sear, as you can see here in the video. I let these cook on a high heat for a good 5 minutes on each side. You can see here that the lamb shanks have started to get a really nice colour. Once the 5-10 minutes was up, I set them aside and I continued cooking the lamb shank pieces. Okay, so for the next part, we're basically making the birria consommé, which is like the sauce, which is a mix and blend of different chilies and spices that I'm going to share with you. So I started off by chopping up 2 onions, also 3 tomatoes, but I ended up actually using 5 tomatoes in total. And then as you can see here, I'm using guajilli chilies and ancho chilies, and one thing that I need to make sure to do, as you see here, is remove the seeds from the chilies. I did actually look online and you actually are able to replant these, so I'm gonna see if I'm able to do that and I'll share with you if that's something that I can do. I also use a whole clove of garlic, and this is the main prep done before this all gets cooked together. Okay, so the next cooking part is what I used to be so intimidated by, but honestly now that I've done it a couple times, it's so simple and easy. So I added in another 50 milliliters of olive oil and I followed it by adding in the onions. Let this cook on a high heat for a couple minutes. Once that's cooking, I then added in the peeled garlic cloves. Let these cook together for a good 2 to 3 minutes on a high heat, and I followed it by adding in sliced tomatoes as well. So once it's been cooking for around 2 to 3 minutes on a high heat, I followed it by adding in the 3 dried guajilli chilies and 3 ancho chilies. Make sure your heat is high during this whole process. I cooked this all together for a good couple minutes. When I say couple minutes, I mean like a good 2 to 3 minutes, until the onions start to brown and until you actually start smelling everything. And then for the last main ingredients, I added in 3 bay leaves, 2 cinnamon sticks and 5 garlic cloves. And then just to have a nice colour in the consommé, I added in a good like 3 tablespoons of tomato puree. And then to finish it off, I added in 1.5 litres of kind of like lukewarm water. One thing that I also added was 2 tablespoons of Mexican oregano, a tablespoon of chili flakes, which is optional because they are hot, a tablespoon of salt, and I finished it off by adding in 1.5 tablespoons of all-purpose seasoning. You probably are thinking it doesn't seem like I added a lot of spices, but honestly everything comes together so well and I feel like less is more. Most exciting part is definitely seeing everything get blended together. One thing that I do recommend is you take out the cinnamon sticks and the bay leaves, as I personally just wouldn't want to blend that, and I don't think it should be blended anyway. Seeing everything get blended together was honestly so satisfying because you can just see all the colours coming together. I didn't blend it all at once. I added in like half the pot, then I ended up adding the rest, as you can see here. So this is the last and final part for the main cooking process. Honestly, I hope you guys found the steps that I did so simple because I tried to make it as easy as possible and as easy for you guys to understand. As for the next part, I added the lamb shanks back into the pot. I didn't add any extra oils as there's so much oil already in the Birria consommé. We've added in the lamb pieces. I followed it by adding in the consommé that we literally just blended. After adding it all in, I don't want any waste, so I ended up adding some more water and I blended that all up, and as you can see I added the rest in. So thinking of it all together, I did add around 2 litres of water. Make sure to cook this low and slow and also give it a good mix, as you see that I'm doing here. And at this point guys, all your main prepping process is actually done. I cooked it on a low heat for 3 hours and I can't even explain how juicy and tender it turned out. This is how it started to look after 2 hours. I don't even think I need to explain it, but you can just see how rich the broth looks, like even with the oil coming to the surface, and you can see how like tender the pieces are. It wasn't fully done here, it did need a bit more time, but make sure you keep on checking your pot every half an hour. At this point it was about 2.5 hours in and you can already see how tender the lamb has turned out. I'm not gonna lie, I did have a big bite of this when it was done, but I actually didn't touch it until the next day. So as soon as the 3 hours was up and the meat was tender, I literally just left it overnight, and I wanted to cook with it in the morning because I feel like the flavours would have just been like 10/10. Honestly, at this point everything is done. The only thing which I ended up doing is I added a bit more salt. Everyone's salt flavour is different. I might need a bit more salt than you do, or you need more salt than I do. So make sure to taste it before serving, as you need to just see if you need to add more salt basically. As you can see here, the meat was so tender. Like I'm not too sure why I was being so delicate with it. But I just want to show you how juicy and tender it turned out, and yeah, honestly I can't even explain it. It was so good. Honestly, I kept the bone inside of the consommé. I'm sure you're supposed to separate it, but I just kept it in, as I don't know about you guys, but bone just has so much flavour. So now for the actual taco making process, I basically added the birria mix onto a stove and I just let it like warm up on a low heat. I'm using a tawa to make the tacos. I don't actually recommend using like a cast iron skillet. For me it didn't work the first time I made them because they just started to rip and it just wasn't basically good. So I'm using corn tortillas, and what I've seen online is you dip it into the consommé and then you add it onto whatever you're cooking it on. I'm using a tawa, which my mum makes like parotes or rotis on. So once the corn tortillas are on, I fold it by adding on some cheddar cheese and some mozzarella cheese. I'm not too sure what the authentic cheese is, but we definitely don't have it in the UK. One piece of advice that I do give you is actually make sure that you are cooking the corn tortillas. They do need a bit of time to cook, and the ones that I am using are gluten-free as well. So once the cheese is on there, I fold it by adding on the lamb shank. And then I added on some chopped onions, followed by some coriander as well. This process does take like a good 1 to 2 minutes. And the heat is actually on like a medium to high heat. Honestly, the whole process of making the tacos was just so like therapeutic. Just make sure that the heat isn't too high. If you have like a stove that's like really strong. Mine is like 50-50. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So you don't want to burn them. But after this step of them cooking and everything being on, I literally just folded them how a taco is. And then for another minute or two, I literally just flipped them over and allow it to cook. I'm gonna be so honest, your first attempt at actually making the tacos might not be perfect. The first time I did them, they kind of ripped, but it's honestly normal. The more you make them, the more you'll learn and you'll be making them perfectly. I can't even believe that this video has finished being edited, as it's something that I was overthinking for so long to even make. But honestly, this is definitely one dish that I would honestly make like monthly, because it turned out so good. If you want to take pictures like me, just serve the tacos in a nice like presentation dish. And I also added the lamb shank consommé in a bowl, as you're supposed to like dip it in and eat it. Honestly, it's so good, so I recommend that you do this. One thing I highly recommend you do is while you're eating them, squeeze on some lemon or lime, because it elevates the flavour like completely. Also guys, I have to admit, the next day I wanted to try it with noodles, as I've seen it like in so many videos and stuff, and I can't even explain how good they turned out. Like, if you do have any spare consommé, I recommend you add it with noodles. I'm not too sure if it would go with rice or like naan. I think that's like the Asian side coming out, but I think it would be good with either. I hope you guys have a good weekend. If you do make this, I honestly would love to see your recreations and let me know how it turns out. The full recipe will be in my description below, and I'll see you guys in my next video.